Bueno, ya estamos en el noveno inning. Now we are in the ninth inning. Please, may you bring the proclamation? Colina, may you come over here, please? Mr. Senator, please, may you approximate over here, please? Now is the moment in which BEPEX will bestow the proclamation Rómulo Betancourt, honoring both Mr. Rómulo Betancourt and Mr. U.S. Senator Bill Nelson.
Thank you, Senator, for all you are doing for Venezuelan people. You know, you are fighting against the people inside the country, and you are the best supporter and help us to live in this country. This is for your job and helping us.
Okay, now the words, the wise words of our senator.
Buenas tardes a todos. Muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad a hablar con ustedes. Yo quiero hablar sobre la libertad de la gente. Es muy importante. Ahora mismo yo hablaré en inglés, ¿ok? By the way, my great-great-grandfather came to Florida in 1829. We had just become a territory of the United States acquired from Spain in 1821. And of course, you know the longest self-sustaining city in the United States is St. Augustine, Florida, settled by Pedro Menendez in 1565. And I just found a very interesting fact. A researcher here in University of South Florida was in the archives in Seville. And in the Spanish archives, he found that there was an Irish priest in St. Augustine in the year 1600, after the founding of 1565. Well, you know how Boston says that they were the first to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. And New York says that they were the first to have the first St. Patrick's Day parade. Not so. We found in the archives in Spain, in St. Augustine in 1600, an Irish priest named Ricardo Alberto. And he had written in the archives, we celebrated St. Patrick's Day in 1601, and we celebrated the first St. Patrick's Day parade in 1601. So you see how much ahead of Boston and New York we are in Florida. Well, thank you. Es un honor para mí for this very kind recognition. It's true. Many times things that you don't get noticed, but I had particular interest in my legislative experience of wanting to help particularly Venezuela. I remember the time that I had been in Venezuela, and I was asked by the Venezuelan press. This is in the first decade after 2000, early on in that decade, and I did not spare any words as to what I thought of Hugo Chavez and what was happening at the border, where the members of the FARC would come across the border to seek refuge when the Colombian military would be closing in on them. And of course I stated this, and I've stated that I thought Hugo Chavez was becoming a dictator. Well, the next time I go to Venezuela, we were met at the airport. We were in a U.S. Air Force jet. Our ambassador is driving with us from the airport up into Caracas, and the leader of the delegation, Senator Dodd, says, well, we made a request to see President Chavez. And our U.S. ambassador says, the president said that he is happy to see Senator Dodd, he's happy to see Senator Chafee, but he refuses to see Senator Nelson. I consider that an honor. As it turns out, the leader of the delegation, Senator Dodd, had the presence of mind to say either he sees all of us or he sees none of us. And of course he relented. And in the course of that conversation, I asked him about the FARC coming across and seeking refuge in Venezuela. And of course, you know what the answer was. Oh, no, we don't let the FARC into Venezuela. And it was that evening when we left Venezuela that there was the discovery that a major FARC leader was living in a hotel in downtown Caracas. And of course, there's a pattern here. It's another pattern just a little bit to the north in the island of Cuba. So we had an American that had been imprisoned over 6 years, Alan Gross. I was doing everything I could behind the scenes, no publicity, to see if we could get him out of prison. I had even gone to see the president of Haiti, who was going to Havana to see Castro. I asked him to start the cooperation and communication to try to get Alan Gross out. And then I offered myself to go see Alan Gross in prison. But because I have been consistently a critic of the Castro regime, they would not give me a visa to go to Cuba to see Alan Gross. Ultimately, as you know, he was released from prison. It was almost 7 years, and yet happily he lived to tell about that hellhole experience that he had. I wish that we could gather today under different circumstances. But we find ourselves with repressive regimes, as we've seen as a young Army lieutenant during Vietnam, when our great enemy was the Soviet Union, and all of what happened behind the Iron Curtain, taking away people's freedom. We've seen that in this hemisphere since 1959. And we've seen it, unfortunately, happen in the golden jewel on the northern part of South America, Venezuela. And we've seen what happened to it. We've seen it go down, down, down. We've seen the economic promise because of oil go down, 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 as Chavez and then Maduro have looted their country. We know the tragic reality that Venezuela, once a historic democracy, has become a failed dictatorship, and that the Venezuelan people who have endured so much continue to suffer at the hands of Maduro's criminal regime. And so, even in the face of suffering, the Venezuelan people are engaged in a fight to restore their democracy. Rómulo Betancourt led a fight for Venezuela's democracy too. And like many others, like many of you, he led a life in exile from his country. I read this week that President Betancourt was sometimes called the father of Venezuelan democracy, and a, quote, a miracle in Latin American politics, because he twice left office as poor as he began. What a stark contrast to Maduro. What a stark contrast to his cronies. What a stark contrast to Castro and his cronies, who have systematically undermined democratic institutions, jailed their political opponents, cracked down on protesters, and through failed economic policies and corruption, starved the Venezuelan people of food, basic supplies, and life-saving medicines. These are the actions of a brutal dictator. And sadly, the struggle of the Venezuelan people is not new. It is eerily similar, as I have said, to the Cuban people. And I fear that the struggle of the Venezuelan people points to a broader trend of attacks on democracy in our hemisphere and around the world. And defending that democracy and restoring that democracy is a constant effort. I know many of you have been doing just that. I want to commend you, and I want to say to you, keep on keeping on. And so, as we stand up for Venezuela, it's certainly in the interest of the United States. In Venezuela, the first thing that we must do loudly and clearly is to condemn the crimes of the Maduro regime. And I guess you should know that you are talking to that senator who, along with some of my colleagues, have spoken out against him and his crimes. We must also continue ramping up economic sanctions on Maduro and his cronies, supporting democratic institutions and the spread of information, the truth. We must demand the release of political prisoners, and we must demand truly fair elections. We must also break Maduro's hold on certain states in the organization of American states and find ways to get badly needed humanitarian assistance to the Venezuelan people. We've made some progress, working on a bipartisan basis with senators like Senator Rubio, Congresswoman Ross Layton, and others. in targeting the regime with sanctions, Senator Menendez as well, Senator Cardin of Maryland as well. Just recently, the Treasury Department finally heeded our concerns that Maduro, with Russia's help, was seeking to evade sanctions with its so-called cryptocurrency. We're working on that. We've also got to preserve funds for democracy programs in Venezuela and Cuba. The Trump administration's budget, unfortunately, would have cut those funds. Thankfully, Senator Rubio, and you all know that Senator Rubio and I are friends, we get along. Senator Rubio, Senator Mendez, Senator Tillis of North Carolina, and I are able to stop these cuts, and we actually increased the funds in the recent appropriations bill. And of course, there's so much more to do. I'm going to keep at it, and I know you will too. Again, for this signal honor that you have given me today, I will never forget it. Muchísimas gracias.
No, not yet. Because we have some present for him. Okay, before our senator leaves, we would like to our plastic painter. Oh, sorry, we have a letter from John to bestow to the senator. Please come over here and give the and this is a document about the situation of people who is asking for refuge and asylum here in the USA. So we're asking for his help just to support the job that people is doing now, the Venezuelan people is doing now. And last but not least, the Venezuelan artist Christopher Pasillo will give a present to the senator. Come over here, please, look for your paintings. Busca tus cuadros, por favor. This is for the senator. A Venezuelan flag.
Porque le va a dar otra bandera a José Antonio Colina y otro a Esteban Hernández.
Ok, me dice el artista que va a romper el protocolo. Los artistas tienen que romper el protocolo siempre, si no, no son artistas. Para entregarle a José Colina un ejemplar también de la bandera. Y la otra es para Esteban Hernández. Please join us. Ah, ok. And I notify you, as you can see, that the time is over. The event has finished. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Gracias por venir. Y esperamos contar con ustedes en el próximo evento.
Y bueno, seguimos adelante en la lucha por una Venezuela libre. Muchas gracias.